Chapter 826, The Thought of Being Forgotten. Monday evening, 160 Bauckland Street. Klein set up a ritual and summoned himself. He planned on investigating the secret hidden in the sewers. While responding above the gray fog, he was in a dilemma about the card to use the Black Emperor or the Tyrant card. It was like the selection of clothes before heading out. In consideration of how Bauckland was a place where the Church of Storms was a very powerful faction, and being afraid that he would end up attracting high-sequence irascible bros, Klein ultimately chose to use the Black Emperor card. He wore a crown and black armor with a cape behind him. Aside from this card of blasphemy, he also brought Creeping Hunger, Isaac's copper whistle, Signor's gold coin, and Broken Finger, the Marauder Pathway's mystical item which Catalea had given him 3 hours ago, as well as some ordinary explosives. Of course, Klein didn't bring the entire crate of explosives. For a spirit body, it was just too heavy. He only took out 5 sticks and left Signor to hold them in his body. As for Death Knell, he had left it in his room. This was to prevent himself from having the urge to participate in a battle. He had very clear goals, so once he discovered any problems, to avoid danger, he would immediately leave and not stay behind. On the contrary, a powerful weapon would end up making him act bold, making him wish to probe deeper and resolve the matter by himself.
This is Bauckland. It's best that I don't create too great a commotion. As for what's hidden in the sewers, I have no way of being clairvoyant about it. I can only divine whether it will be dangerous.
Klein looked at the wall clock in his room, and he confirmed that there was another hour and a half before Hazel took action, like she usually did. His figure suddenly vanished as he passed through the balcony's glass and flew into the streets before entering the sewers. In the dirty and humid environment, Klein took out a Lowen gold coin and made Wraith Senor appear in front of him with his dark red coat and old triangular hat. Following that, he handed over the tweezers that resembled 2 ground bone fingers to his marionette. Just holding it on him for a short period of time had nearly made him steal the sewer's manhole cover. Senor held Broken Finger and walked ahead. Dressed as the Black Emperor, Klein turned invisible and walked behind, allowing his marionette to open up a gap of at least 50 meters from him. With this distance between them, he was no longer affected by kleptomania, and as a dead person, Senor also lacked the thoughts of stealing. He didn't even have any thoughts. Turning in at the corresponding fork and passing through the hidden door, Wraith Senor held the grayish-white tweezer and appeared inside the half-natural, half-artificial cave. Unlike before, the oilskin-wrapped tools like shovels had changed positions. The hidden passage on the right had deepened a little. Hey, that was clearly Hazel's main focus. Right on the heels of that, Klein, who didn't enter the fork, stayed close to the wall of the sewers without touching it, his back facing the target region. He controlled his marionette as he walked deeper into the right passage. Soon, Senor came to the end. At this moment, Klein suddenly felt the grayish-white tweezer in his marionette's hand tremble subtly, as though it had been attracted by some unknown object not far away. The unknown item was deep and profound like a calm ocean. It made it difficult to pry into its exact state.
A characteristic that's alive, much closer to that of a spirit.
Klein was only able to determine this, as he immediately let Senor use Mirror Leap to return to the half-natural, half-artificial cave, onto a shovel that hadn't rusted. He didn't attempt to head deeper underground via the passage. Then Senor appeared again, took out the 5 ordinary sticks of explosives from inside its body and placed them in different spots. Every wraith was a demolition expert. After doing all of this, Senor's figure phased away, appearing on the surface of the gold coin in Klein's hand. As he stuffed the gold coin into his body, Klein raised his right hand, in preparation to snap his fingers and trigger the 5 sticks of explosives. His idea was very simple. It was to deliver an explosion of a suitable scale in order to destroy Hazel's hard work and traces. It would attract the Nighthawks and resolve everything. This way, regardless of what was hidden deep in the passage, it wouldn't bring him danger. In Bauckland, knowing how to ingeniously sound the alarm was more effective and safer than rashly attacking by himself. This was especially so when Klein wasn't capable of determining that the matter involved a demigod.
I'm such a good citizen.
As Klein gave a self-deprecating remark, he prepared to snap his fingers to ignite the explosives. Suddenly, his head swayed a little as he lowered his arm, as though nothing had happened. The cautious Klein immediately ended the summoning and returned above the gray fog. Then, he returned to the real world and entered his physical body. Just as he was about to busy himself to bring back Creeping Hunger, Señor's gold coin, and the other items from the mysterious space above the gray fog, he frowned slightly. He seriously recalled the entire process of his late-night exploration when he was alarmed to realize that he had apparently lost a small portion of his memories. He didn't remember if he had triggered the 5 sticks of ordinary explosives. As he turned his head to sense his surroundings and confirmed that the entire street was very silent, Klein began to believe that he hadn't snapped his fingers.
This is a beyonder power of a dream stealer? It seems to be much stronger than Mobet. If not for the gray fog and my habit of doing an after-action review, I might not have discovered that my thoughts of triggering the explosives were stolen away. The other party might have also snapped his fingers, but without the flame-controlling powers to work in concert, nothing happened.
Klein's expression turned grave as he thought, prepared to make another attempt. Similarly, to prevent himself from being tracked, he still summoned himself and responded to himself. With the Black Emperor card, Klein left 160 Bauckland Street from another side, deliberately circling 2 streets away before arriving at the sewer's manhole. This time, he didn't approach the fork. Staying not far from the manhole, he used his enhanced flame controlling to sense the explosive and lifted his right hand. He raised it and lowered it, as Klein rapidly ended the summoning and returned above the gray fog to prevent himself from being attacked by an unknown existence. Not in a hurry to return to the real world, he sat at the chair of the world, doing a debrief of the entire process.
I forgot to trigger the explosives again. If I didn't force myself to recall this, I wouldn't have even considered such a problem. Truly quite impressive. The one that steered Hazel to the sewers to dig is probably a demigod. Why didn't he directly parasitize Hazel? Could it be due to particular reasons that he's sealed somewhere in the sewers and can only release some of his powers to drive Hazel to help him via a dream? The one that caused Broken Fingers to react abnormally via the law of Beyonder characteristic convergence is also him? He is unable to control the signs in regards to this?
Klein thought as he wrapped the corner of the long, mottled table. After having a rough guess, he discovered that there was apparently no way of truly carrying out his original plans. This was because his thoughts would be stolen once he entered the distance in which he could use flame controlling to ignite the explosives. Even if he recalled it later, there was no way to make up for it. Considering how Hazel would be affected by her dream, Klein suspected that the limits to the person's powers didn't stop at the manhole. If he discovered that Hero Bandit Black Emperor was related to Dwayne Dantes, then he would lose his corresponding thoughts and memories even while sleeping in his bedroom.
However, he has no way of locking on to me by passing over the gray fog. Does he think it's so easy to stop me from sounding the alarm?
Klein thought as he cautiously summoned a paper figurine and used a tiny amount of the powers of the mysterious space above the gray fog. With the ritual that had yet been terminated, he conjured an angel and forcefully created an interference effect. After doing this, he carried the Black Emperor card and entered his bedroom with his door of summoning. Klein's new plan was to head to another street, find a random house, and borrow some pen and paper to write. At the end of the 6th left fork in the Bauckland Street sewers, there's a secret passage that's suspected to hide a demigod from the Marauder pathway, or something similar. Then, with the image of Bauckland Street, he would plaster the piece of paper on St. Samuel Cathedral's entrance as a public notice. Of course, he would politely knock on the door to let the bishops inside sense it to prevent ordinary people from first seeing it. At times, the most primitive methods are the most effective ones. Just as Klein was about to leave 160 Bauckland Street from another area, he suddenly felt a tremor as a deep rumble sounded from afar.
It was ignited. The explosives were ignited. Who did it?
Klein paused in surprise. It was definitely not done by him, as it couldn't have been delayed for so long, and previously there wasn't anyone in the sewers. Even if there was someone, the thought of igniting the explosives would be stolen away.
Unless a demigod happened to come, But how could it be this coincidental? My fool. There's another possibility. It was done by the demigod, from the marauder pathway. He had repeatedly stolen my thoughts before, preventing me from using flame controlling. It was to buy time to leave. Now that it's finally done, he triggered the explosives to destroy all the evidence?
That adheres to logic, as he should know very well that a powerful being whose origins can't be traced cannot be stopped if he insists on sounding the alarm. The best solution is to drop its tail in order to survive, just like a gecko.
However, if he can leave, why did he steer Hazel into digging the secret passage? Doing so will deal tremendous harm to him.
Klein thought of certain possibilities, but he was unable to verify any of them. Furthermore, he was certain that the underground explosion was bound to have already attracted attention. Hence, he immediately left Creeping Hunger and other items behind, terminated the summoning, and returned above the gray fog. After returning to the real world, he stopped the ritual, cleared the altar, and cleaned all traces before getting into bed. 39 Boakland Street, Member of Parliament Mock's house. Hazel, who didn't sleep at all, was alarmed by the tremors and deep humming sound. She walked to the balcony and drew the curtains to look towards the sewer manhole. However, she didn't notice any anomalies. After observing for a while, the uncertain her had decided to cancel her operation for the night and sleep in peace. At this moment, she suddenly heard squeaking as she turned to look at the corner of her balcony. Boo. At some point in time, there was a gray rat sitting there covered in sewage water. Chapter 827. Plenty of people coming and going. Despite getting in bed, Klein didn't manage to sleep until daybreak. This was because he believed that, with most people stirred awake from the commotion underground, him sleeping too soundly without noticing anything would make him suspicious. Indeed, just as he got out of bed, walked to the balcony, and drew the curtains to pretend to search for the source of the commotion, Walter came knocking at his door. 2 servants with double-barreled hunting rifles were assigned to protect their employer to prevent any accidents from happening. Before long, the police arrived. Based on the descriptions of the residents in the area, they identified the sewers as the target. As for what they discovered or whether they sought backup from the Nighthawks, the ordinary citizen, Mr. Dwayne Dantes, had no idea. After confirming that there wouldn't be any more accidents, he sent his butler and servants away and quickly got some sleep. By the time he woke up again, Boakland Street had been restored to normal. Pedestrians were on the streets, and the carriages were coming and going. The intis parasol trees that lined the side of the street continued making the area seem tranquil. Are the results of the investigation out? Klein looked at himself in the mirror as he asked Richardson, who was helping him smooth his clothes. Richardson had already inquired about the matter and was waiting for his employer to ask. He immediately replied,
Apparently some gang members were trading firearms in the nearby sewers and accidentally triggered an explosion.
What a reasonable explanation. Klein didn't probe deeper, nor did he consider where the demigod of the marauder pathway who stole away his thoughts went to, or if the Nighthawks found him. Firstly, this was because he believed that the demigod's action of igniting the explosives would definitely implicate him in a serious manner. If the demigod had the ability or suitable environment to do so, he would have long parasitized Hazel without going through the convoluted and troublesome hassle. This also meant that in the next 2 to 3 weeks, or even 2 to 3 months, Klein didn't need to worry about the demigod. Secondly, if he continued pursuing the matter and pushed the demigod into a corner, Klein had no doubts that he would be harmed as a result. Once the demigod lost all inhibitions and began affecting the surroundings on a large scale. Then, even if he didn't expose himself, he would suffer the demigod's attack, as well as implicate the innocent residents along the street. Apart from the first 2 reasons, Klein was apprehensive over the matter. If anomalies kept happening in the originally normal Boakland Street, it was bound to attract a deeper level of suspicion from the official beyonders. And all of this happened after Dwayne Dantes moved in. Even if Klein's body was covered in mouths, there was no way he could explain himself. When the time came, he would have to give up on his plans and reconsider new ones.
I shouldn't head into the sewers for the time being. There's probably a trap laid by the official beyonders. There's one thing to do. Take note of Hazel without leaving any clues. I'll observe to see if there are any abnormalities about her, and once I discover any dangerous signs, I'll immediately turn into Hero Bandit and put up advertisements at St. Samuel Cathedral.
Klein went downstairs to have breakfast with a composed look. After doing so, he returned to his master bedroom and got Richardson to wait by the door. As for himself, he took out the almost torn paper crane from his wallet. He planned on using it one last time, and informed Snake of Fate Will Septon of the choices that Admiral of Stars was offering him, and if he was agreeable or not. Typically, he could complete such matters by visiting his parents. However, without Dr. Aaron's invitation, and him lacking a sufficient reason to pay a visit, that wasn't the best choice, as it easily made others question his motives. He obviously couldn't tell Dr. Aaron that he wasn't there for him, but for the fetus in his wife's womb. After carefully unfolding the paper crane, Klein glanced at the pencil marks left on it. His intuition told him that, as long as he used an eraser, the paper would definitely tear. However, this didn't stump him. He got a black fountain pen and directly wrote on it,
"The other party has made their offer."
The black ink was a lot more obvious than the pencil marks. Therefore, although the text overlapped, it didn't affect anyone from recognizing the words written on it.
There are always more solutions than problems.
Klein nodded in satisfaction as he folded the unfolded piece of paper according to its crease marks. This time, he suspected that unfolding it again would result in it tearing. In the Berg household in the City of Silver, ever since the tarot gathering ended, Derek was like a petrified statue who sat by his bed, motionless. After an unknown period of time, he was awakened by the noise on the streets outside. However, the feeling that he was still in a nightmare continued enveloping him. It made his footsteps towards the window appear especially heavy.
God might already be dead. God might not return again.
Such thoughts kept resounding inside Derek's mind as he felt an irresistible sense of despair and pain. Back when he had to kill his parents with his own hands, he had already suspected if God would return or show his blessings to his forsaken people of the dark. He later thought of relying on Mr. Fool, allowing himself to become the true sun and help the people of the City of Silver to escape their cursed fates. However, having been educated from a young age and the environment constantly affecting him, he still looked forward to the return of the Creator. He held expectations that sacrifices and the repentance of the City of Silver would earn them a response. And now all his hopes had been dashed. The tiny sliver of hope that was left had now been engulfed by the darkness.
The City of Silver will continue in this state until it disappears into the darkness. There will be no one remembering that we once existed and struggled.
Derek cast his gaze out the window and saw many of his neighbors gathered together. They were praying and seeking forgiveness from the Lord that created everything. This wasn't a ritual organized by the 6-member council, but a tradition that took form in the City of Silver after 2,000 to 3,000 years. They would pray for almost anything: good developments, unstable emotions, an injury in the family, and the birth of new life. Lightning streaked across the sky and illuminated the streets. Derek stood motionless in the darkness of his room, staring outside in a daze. Unknowingly, he clenched his fists. By the time his neighbors dispersed, he finally retracted his gaze, his expression somewhat warped. He reached out to touch Thunder God's roar as his gaze gradually focused. He planned on following Mr. Hangman's advice to befriend others to help him. Soon he felt a little stumped because he had no idea how to make friends. Nor did he know how to warmly greet others or find a topic of conversation. This was in violation of his own character. After some thought, Derek decided to head to the training field and use combat to re-establish ties with people he was familiar with in the past. That was a gathering ground for the residents of the City of Silver, where he often met people he found familiar. It was late at night once again. Klein once again saw the pitch-black steeple and desolate plains in his dream, as he had desired. Passing through one obstacle after another, he arrived at the region with the scattered tarot cards. A black pram was already waiting there. Will Septon, who was wrapped in silver silk, asked with a bright voice,
What are the choices?
You are being very proactive this time. What happened to your reservation as a sequence one? However, kids are like that. It's good that you maintain such a state of mind.
Klein silently chuckled as he said,
2 choices. Choose either one. 1, it's to take one look at the Wheel of Fortune card. 2, it's the method to regain a certain amount of strength during your weak stages.
Will Septon fell silent for a second and chuckled.
So it's Bernadette on the other side. My intuition was right after all. I'll be able to obtain something good this time.
Following that, he asked,
Which choice do you think I'll choose?
Klein's subconscious idea was,
I have a chance of posing a question once.
Then, he said with a self-deprecating laugh,
2.
Will Septon, TSKED, and said,
Do I look like a mythical creature that doesn't have such methods? I've already restarted so many times. I definitely have the right state of mind to make preparations.
Reasonable, Klein nodded and said,
You wish to take a look at the Wheel of Fortune card? Or do you want them to switch the choices?
Will Septon sucked at his thumb and said,
I choose 2.
Klein's expression froze. Will Septon smiled and said,
Knowing one more method means one more trump card. Isn't that the right thing to do?
Yes, whatever you say is right.
Klein replied in exasperation.
All right, when can you complete the transaction?
Will Septon waved his short arms and said,
Of course, it's when I'm born and have the placenta blood. This will probably be in early July, but it might be brought forward.
Having said that, he relaxed his limbs as he chuckled.
I wouldn't mind it either if they wished to hand me the method ahead of time.
They?
Klein subconsciously asked, unsure how the Snake of Mercury knew that it was they and not her. Queen Mystic, Bernadette. Will Septon sucked at his thumb and said indiscernibly,
Bernadette has already passed that stage. The stage. Now that needs a drop of mythical creature blood. When's one's likely being prepared for her subordinate?
Is that the case? Ma'am Hermit needs it?
Klein asked thoughtfully.
What is that drop of mythical creature blood for? The main ingredient of some potion?
He connected it to the fact that a drop of divine blood from the eternal blazing sun could be used for the unshadowed potion's main ingredient.
No, isn't it suicidal for other pathways to consume the blood of a fate pathway mythical creature?
Will Septon said with a scoff.
I heard that to advance from sequence 5 to sequence 4 for the mystery prior pathway, there's a need to completely analyze a drop of a mythical creature's blood and, from there, obtain complicated and massive amounts of knowledge. This is part of the ritual. As the mythical creature blood used is different, what they will be proficient at during the mysticologist stage will also differ.
To think that's possible. The rituals of the different pathways and different sequences all have their unique traits.
Klein bowed in enlightenment and said,
Thank you for your answer.
Will Septon waved his hand and said,
Stop disturbing me. Letting me be born in peace is the greatest form of gratitude.
Without waiting for Klein to answer, he added,
Giving me that method doesn't count.
With that said, the black pram retreated and entered the shadows before vanishing. Klein watched the surrounding walls collapse as he silently heaved a sigh of relief. He planned on escaping to sleep again. Sigh forven, neva 5. At this moment he froze because he discovered a new power infiltrating his dream.
Another one is coming just after one left. This is more lively than in the day.
As Klein changed the dream according to his wishes, he pretended to look around in a daze. Chapter 828, Movement of the Night. Klein had set the dream to be that of 160 Boakland Street. He produced many beauties that circled around Dwayne Dantes. He did this to perfectly create the image of a knowledgeable and experienced tycoon, who could only let go in his dreams while holding back in the real world to uphold his reputation. Sitting on a sofa and receiving a cup of red wine from a young lady, Klein found his surroundings suddenly change before he could even taste it. It turned from his brightly lit villa, filled with elegant beauties, to a dark, humid, and dirty sewer. Following that, he saw 5 familiar explosives in his hands.
Aren't these the ones I placed earlier?
Klein was first taken aback as he pretended to jump in fright, throwing away the explosives as he looked around warily. Noticing that there weren't any other abnormalities, he retreated one step at a time until he felt his way to an upright metallic ladder. He decisively climbed up, moved the manhole cover away, and left the sewer. As he returned to Böcklen Street, his dream shattered as he woke up. Klein opened his eyes and found himself in a dark room. As he looked at the ceiling adorned in gold, he recalled his encounter.
This was done by that marauder Pathway's demigod. He escaped the pursuit of the Nighthawks and is still hiding nearby. As he's afraid that the Black Emperor who exposed his whereabouts would appear again, he began steering dreams to seek out his target? Very possible. If it wasn't because I can maintain my reason and lucidity when others infiltrate my dreams, I might have been driven by my subconscious to place the explosives again. After all, this is something I've done before, and the memory is still fresh in my mind. Thankfully, I concluded the principle that a marionettist should try to hide behind the scenes. Be it my exploration of the sewers or meeting with Trissy, I had relied on my marionette. Even if it's because of the distance, I didn't choose to do it personally, and had instead used my spirit body with the gray fog as a proxy, while carrying items that can interfere with the prying of secrets and divination, making it impossible to determine who is the true mastermind. I would have long been discovered and targeted. Even if I didn't die, I would have to flee Böcklen in a pathetic manner.
Upon thinking of this, Klein felt relieved. In the beginning, he wasn't certain of the secret hidden in the sewers. He had never expected it to be a demigod, but he had abided by the marionettist's principles and followed his strict requirements. Hence, he avoided the tragic outcome of having his act exposed. Böcklen really is a dangerous place. Any mistake can result in trouble. As Klein reflected over the matter, he felt that his marionettist potion had unknowingly digested a little. After he composed himself, he chuckled inwardly.
It appears that Demigod is still in Böcklen Street. He's probably hiding in Hazel, or maybe even by her side. Heh, if that demigod had infiltrated my dream a minute or two earlier, he would have met Snake of Fate Will Osepton. Although this Sequence 1 angel is still in a weak phase, that's only relative to other angels like Ouroboros. Faced with a sneaky demigod who can't even parasitize Hazel, there likely won't be any trouble. Ignoring the other powers, just revealing a full mythical creature state would be enough to deal tremendous damage to a demigod who's equally weak. I dare to bet that Will Osepton must have sensed it ahead of time to choose that time window to come out, thus successfully avoiding an encounter with any other demigods. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make that marauder demigod understand how dangerous it is to randomly infiltrate dreams in Böcklen. Leonard definitely knows this very well.
Klein reined in his thoughts and pretended as though nothing had happened. With cogitation, he fell asleep again. It was only when the sun rose high in the sky that he woke up naturally. He sat up, transformed into Gehrman Sparrow, and prayed.
Please inform Ma'am Hermit that the angel has accepted the method to regain a certain amount of strength during one's weak stages. He has agreed to complete the transaction in late June or early July. You can also ask Bernadette about when I can meet her.
After completing the prayer, Klein transformed back into Dwayne Dantes, got out of bed, and entered the bathroom to wash up. After brushing his teeth and washing his face, thus becoming abnormally alert, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and headed above the gray fog. He then threw the scene of the prayer into the crimson star, representing the hermit. On the docked future, Catalia watched Frank Lee step on the dock while filled with anticipation. He planned on finding some place to sell his items and save up £8,000 to purchase the Druid Beyonder characteristic. She couldn't help but raise her hand to her forehead, feeling an inexplicable lack of confidence. Although she believed that she could suppress Frank Lee, even if he was a druid, thanks to her strength, mysticism, knowledge, and mystical items, Just the thought of his strange ideas, as well his terrifying ability to put them into action, made her feel that the problem wasn't that simple. She didn't wish for a watermelon to grow on her head or participate in the taro gathering above the gray fog while covered with ears of wheat.
Thankfully, he still doesn't have the druid potion formula. For now, I don't have to worry about him advancing to sequence 5.
Catalina nudged her glasses as she comforted herself. At this moment, an illusory fog emanated in front of her as Gehrman Sparrow's voice sounded in her ears.
That angel agreed?
Catalina's expression softened as she couldn't help smiling.
Once she obtained that drop of mythical creature blood, it meant that she was very close to the realm of a demigod. She already had the mysticologist's potion formula. She has also completed the necessary conditions to exchange for a main ingredient from the Moses ascetic order. She also knew of the channel to obtain the other main ingredient, as well as the method to obtain it. I just need to wait until July.
Catalina pursed her lips as her gaze penetrated the thick glasses while she surveyed her captain's cabin. Thursday afternoon. Just as Klein finished a class on ancient literature, he heard the illusory, stacked please. After heading above the gray fog, he discovered that the supplicant was the hermit Catalina. Admiral of Stars had requested Mr. Fool to inform the world that Queen Mystic had agreed to his request. If he was in Backland, they could meet near the entrance of the bridge on the south bank of the Tussock River at 11 in the evening.
Bernadette is still in Backland.
Klein conjured Gehrman Sparrow and gave a confirmatory answer. At 10:58 page M, he entered his bathroom and took out a paper figurine from his pocket. Pa! Klein shook it and made the paper figurine turn into a Dwayne Dantes who sat on the toilet with a book in hand as though he was daydreaming. Then he shortened himself by about 4 centimeters. His face turned thin as his facial contours became more pronounced. He had transformed into Gehrman Sparrow. Right on the heels of that, the glove on his left hand turned transparent as countless illusory figures appeared within. Following that, Klein saw the surrounding colors saturate before turning well separated and stacked. His body then phased away from the real world. He quickly traversed the spirit world and, based on his location, kept adjusting his trajectory. In just a few seconds, he appeared at the south bank of the Tussock River, where the Backland Bridge entrance was. At that moment, it was already late at night. There was no one on the bridge, and it was extremely silent. The only thing that could be seen was a platoon of soldiers guarding the bridge a short distance away. Klein was just about to find Queen Mystic Bernadette's traces when he suddenly saw green pea vines droop down from the sky, interweaving to form a lush forest. This forest didn't have a peak, as the veins formed different paths that either intersected or spiraled before extending high into the sky. Klein was taken aback for a second as he casually found a pea vine and hung over a tiny trail in midair, before taking steps forward. After an unknown period of time, he saw that the green plants were connected to a seat that resembled a hammock. It was gently shaking above him. Queen Mystic was sitting there, wearing a white Intis-styled shirt and a dark black jacket. By her waist was a thin rapier. Other than not wearing a triangular hat, she was dressed like a standard pirate captain. She didn't only reveal her black leather boots like she did back when she interacted with Sherlock Moriarty in Backland. At that moment, her chestnut hair cascaded down as her blue and deep eyes looked over. She gently said without any emotion,
"Thank that existence behind you on my behalf."
So you are still quite respectful towards the fool. The few answers I previously gave her had likely resolved some of her confusion.
With the mask of Gehrman Sparrow on, Klein politely replied,
All right.
Bernadette's eyes didn't shift as she continued looking at him.
Is there something this time?
Klein paused for a second as he said the words he had already prepared.
I wish to receive your help in reproducing the prolonged state of being contaminated by the core seal's power behind Chanis Gate of the Church of Evernight.
As he spoke, Klein made Wraith Senor appear beside him. Bernadette looked deeply at the upright Admiral of Blood. Without asking Gehrman Sparrow how he knew that she had the means, she calmly said,
The core seals in the different cathedrals of the Church of Evernight are different. The state of contamination will also be different. Is it the Evernight pathway, the death pathway, or something else? Is it a main diocese cathedral, or a typical central cathedral in a city?
She had directly eliminated the option of the Church of Evernight's headquarters, the Cathedral of Serenity. This was because even a king of angels wouldn't cast their sights on it. Klein thought for a moment before saying,
Diocese Cathedral, Evernight Pathway.
Bernadette nodded gently and said,
Then I can allow him to suffer the corresponding contamination, but doing so will basically destroy this marionette of yours. It can still be used normally in the beginning, but with the passage of time, the contamination will worsen. He will slowly fall asleep, never to awaken.
Can the time it takes for the complete contamination be pushed back?
Klein asked, holding back the pain of potentially losing a marionette.
Senor was one of the most valuable assets he had.
Bernadette said, with a calm expression.
2 months is the limit.
Klein struggled inwardly for 2 seconds before replying in a deadpan manner.
All right.
He then pressed his hand to his chest and bowed.
Thank you for your help.
Bernadette didn't say a word as she retracted her gaze. She extended her right hand as words that were written in Jotun, Dragonese, Elvish, and ancient Hermes appeared in midair. These words interwove into strange symbols with a star-like radiance, as though they were opening a secret door that led deep into the spirit world. With the secret door opened, a gust of wind blew, conjuring the upper body of a man that was covered in white cloth.
Sleep bugle.
Bernadette said gently but sternly. The man who had a torso and wind for his bottom replied reverently, pulling out a human skull from the white cloth. The skull's eye sockets were deeply recessed and dark. It was impossible to see the bottom. The rest of the skull was covered with holes of different shapes and cracks. It was white, like a piece of jade. Bernadette took the sleep bugle and glanced at Gehrman Sparrow.
Go back at least 50 meters.
Klein didn't ask why as he left Senor in his original spot, and he quickly distanced himself along the pea-vine path. After exceeding 50 meters, he suddenly heard a distant and serene melody that was filled with sorrow and gloom. Subconsciously, Klein looked up at the area covered by the pea vines. Bernadette was sitting with her back slightly hunched. Her chestnut hair was fluttering as her head was bowed. She had placed the human skull to her mouth, letting the orifices produce an airstream that appeared like the orchestrated movement of the night. The movement brought with it the power of calmness and faint melancholy. Bit by bit, it spread out without alarming the soldiers guarding the bridge beyond the pea-vine forest. Klein stood there and listened seriously, when he suddenly had a pining for home.
That was home, something that a traveler who had been drifting for a long period of time yearned for the most, but was unable to touch.
Chapter 829, Arrival of June. In the dark night, and within the green vine forest, Klein closed his eyes as he listened to that musical movement that was emitted from the sky. He felt calm in both body and mind, but he felt a faint sense of depression and sadness grow, emanate, and resonate. After an unknown period of time, the soothing melody finally disappeared as the hanging pea vines gently swayed in the night wind. Klein sighed silently as he opened his eyes and looked up. He saw that Queen Mystic Bernadette had handed over the orifice-filled human skull back to the servant that was half man, half wind.
It's done?
Bernadette's gentle and calm voice sounded.
Thank you for your help.
Klein bowed once again as he controlled Wraith Senor to return to his side. At this moment, the pea vines retracted upwards and slowly turned faint. Soon, the green forest vanished. Klein and Senor simultaneously landed at the entrance to the bridge. There was no one around this silent area, apart from a platoon of soldiers whose backs were facing him. There was nothing different from before. The fairy tale-like scene from before was like an illusion. Only then did Klein have the time to observe his marionette. He discovered that his marionette appeared more like a dead man than before. His face was pale and his aura cold. He gave off an obvious sense of gloom.
This is likely the result of a single high dosage of contamination. If it's just guarding Channa's gate for 1 to 2 times a week, with each duty happening during the day, it wouldn't be this serious. It's impossible that 2 months is the limit. If that's the case, even if it's the church of an Orthodox deity, it won't be able to afford such losses. I expect a normal keeper to live for several years, or even more than 10 years. However, it's easy to mutate midway and lose control. Sigh, they likely already know of the outcome when they chose to become keepers.
Klein felt poignant as he made Senor project himself onto the gold coin inside the iron cigar case. Following that, he used traveling to head out to sea. After selecting food for creeping hunger, he returned to his master bedroom's bathroom in 160 Bulkland Street, 5th June, Sunday, inside the Hall family castle. Audrey was sitting in front of a study desk as she admired the sight of the mystical item she had just acquired. Its outer appearance was that of a black fishnet glove that reached the elbow. It appeared to be a product of the royal family that came with a sense of magnificence and elegance. This was the item the artisan had made after some time, using the mentor of disorder beyonder characteristic she had obtained from the world German Sparrow. Audrey had previously asked her father, Earl Hall, and obtained the answer.
You can buy and use it for yourself. Having such filial thoughts is already good enough.
Hence, she specially instructed Mr. Hangman to get the artisan to make it into an item that could be carried around by a lady. This also made her suspect if her father had better mystical items, or if the Church of the Goddess provided him rather high-level protection. Based on the hangman's description, this fishnet glove gave the wearer several beyonder powers. One of them was the enhancement of one's dignity and body, making surrounding beings lower their own standing to submit themselves without realizing it. Another was distort, the ability to distort a target's words, actions, and intent. It allowed one to formulate a certain order that provided them with an advantage. The third was bribe, which bribed them via a symbolic gesture. It allowed the target to feel a great sense of fondness, making it difficult to have any thoughts of animosity or even wish to fight the wearer. If the conditions were suitable, the person who received the bribe had an extremely small chance of attacking their companions. Audrey heard from Mr. World that this was one type of bribe beyonder powers that was known as bribe, charm. The last was to produce a disorder effect on a target or surrounding area, making it difficult for attacks to land on the wearer and making the enemy easily choose to make the wrong judgment. Audrey was very satisfied with these effects. However, what vexed her was that the artisan's level was lacking. The Sequence 5 mystical item he created had relatively serious negative side effects. First, it would make the wearer's psyche slowly grow dark, making them often wish to take shortcuts, use schemes, or dishonorable methods to complete matters. Second, the wearer would enter a state of disorder after wearing it for more than 3 minutes. Audrey had tried it previously, and she had made a mistake without realizing it when she was bathing. The normal procedure was to let her maidservant fill the bathtub with water and adjust the temperature before she took off her clothes, enter the bathtub, and then finish washing up. However, Audrey had first entered the bathtub, filled it with cold water, and waited until her clothes were wet before she remembered to take them off. The only thing she was thankful about was that she had eventually controlled herself and hadn't called her lady's maid in to witness such an embarrassing matter.
This makes me feel like a curly-haired baboon.
Audrey thought in embarrassment and anger. She found the first negative effect acceptable because she was a psychiatrist. She could often check on herself and eliminate her dark thoughts. Furthermore, she had Susie to provide her with help as an onlooker. However, the second negative effect was completely unacceptable.
The second negative effect is just too problematic. All I can do is bring it with me. I'll wear it at critical moments. Ah, right, I still have lie. It will amplify my emotions, so combined with the glove, it will only worsen the darkness in my heart. The current me might not be able to withstand it.
Audrey's green eyes darted around as she tried thinking of a solution. Dota? At this moment she heard knocking at the door. Dota, her maidservant Annie said from the outside.
Miss Audrey, the Lord wishes to talk to you about something.
Audrey left the black fishnet glove on the door as she stood up and came to the door to open it. Earl Hall, who didn't wear a coat at home except for a shirt and matching vest, touched his beautiful beard and said with a chuckle,
Are you not ready? We'll be returning to Backland in a while. Tomorrow night will be your 18th birthday party.
As he spoke, Earl Hall looked at Annie and company, indicating that they should retreat.
Sigh, it's the annual socializing season again.
Audrey nodded, feigning her maturity. Earl Hall glanced at his daughter and asked with a laugh,
Have you thought of how you can make use of that item yet?
Audrey pursed her lips into a smile.
Of course. I plan on folding it up and putting it into a bag. Susie will carry it.
This way, as she didn't wear it or use it, Susie wouldn't find herself in any situation of disorder and confusion, and its dark psychological problems could be treated by Audrey with placate. More importantly, without lies amplification, Susie, who was also a psychiatrist, could also check on herself inwardly and regulate her mental state from time to time. Earl Hall was taken aback as he praised with a surprised smile.
That's a smart solution.
Audrey felt smug, but she said in a reserved manner,
I plan on calling it the Hand of Horror. Dear Earl, thank you for the birthday present, Tilda. In a few more days, I can concoct the potion and attempt an advancement.
Audrey added inwardly in joy. Sunday night, 160 Bokeland Street. Klein stood on his balcony as he peeped at the street through the gap in the curtains. He couldn't help but feel somewhat nervous. If nothing unexpected happened, he planned on beginning his plan of stealing the Antigonus family's notebook in a while. With Queen Mystic Bernadette's help, he had made his marionette enter a contaminated state. From his frequent visits to the cathedral for praying, Bible studies, and donations, he had figured out the keeper's duty roster. There was only one thing left that was necessary for the preparations of Klein's theft. That was to secretly replace his target without anyone noticing it. Based on Klein's understanding of the situation, the keepers would head underground at daybreak, and it was during such times when the cathedral remained close. To directly infiltrate inside ran the risk of being discovered by a demigod like the diocese's archbishop. It could be said that there was no chance of success. Therefore, Klein's plan was to infiltrate the cathedral one day earlier and patiently wait for an opportunity. This undoubtedly needed a sufficient disguise, but this didn't stump a faceless. After observing for some time, Klein discovered that the church held a major mass on Sunday night. This was because Sunday and the night were symbols for the goddess, and after the mass ended, the servants would be busy clearing the trash and throwing them outside. Klein's plan was to seize this opportunity to knock a servant unconscious and enter the cathedral while disguised as the servant before sleeping in the servants' quarters. For this, he had even purchased a dosage that was able to let a person fall into a deep sleep for 10 hours without causing any physical harm. He bought it from Emlyn for £5. Phew! After a few minutes, Klein slowly exhaled as he drew the curtains. He walked back to his bedroom, took 4 steps counterclockwise, and went above the gray fog. Sitting in the fool's chair, he thought in silence for a minute before conjuring a pen and paper. He wrote the divination statement. This theft of the Antigonus family's notebook will be dangerous. After putting down the dark red fountain pen, Klein removed the spirit pendulum from his left wrist. Using his left hand to hold the chain, he let the topaz hang down over the paper in close proximity with it. He entered cogitation, closed his eyes, and silently chanted the divination statement. After repeating it 7 times, he slowly opened his eyes and saw the spirit pendulum spinning clockwise with an ordinary amplitude and frequency.
There's danger, but it's within an acceptable range.
Klein quickly made an interpretation. In fact, he was a little worried if his divination was being interfered with, just like how the Mother Tree of Desire had done so. However, he had no way of verifying it, much less falsify the possibility. Therefore, when the divination outcome, plans, and preparations satisfied the required conditions, Klein had made up his mind. He looked at the hanging topaz that slowly came to a halt. In Chinese, he said in a heavy voice,
"A strung bow is poised to strike."
Before he finished his sentence, Klein let his spirituality envelop himself as he simulated the feeling of falling, and he returned to the real world. This time, he planned on only bringing 3 items with him: Creeping Hunger, Signor's gold coin, and Azac's copper whistle. The characteristic they had in common was that they could be stored inside an iron cigar case. He could use Paper Angel and a wall of spirituality to provide a double layer of screening. As for the other items, there was a high chance that they couldn't pass through Chanis Gate, as they could easily trigger an anomaly at the core seal. Therefore, Klein had left the rest of his items, as well as his money, above the gray fog, prepared to immediately flee if anything went wrong.
It's just that the 3% Coin Company shares worth £12,800 is tied to Dwayne Dantes' identity.
Klein quickly reined in his thoughts, picked up a mirror, and placed it on the pillow. Following that, he drew the mysterious symbol used for summoning Erodes. Chapter 830, Infiltration. The mirror on Klein's pillow glowed with an aqueous luster as silver points of light gathered to form Loanese words.
Exalted Great Master, your loyal and humble servant, Erode, is constantly at your service.
Klein stood beside the bed and looked at the mirror before calmly asking,
Where is the Antigonus family's notebook located behind St. Samuel Cathedral's Chanis Gate?
He wanted to confirm the location so that he could directly head for his target and complete his plan in the shortest time possible. Through this, he could avoid all kinds of accidents. Silver text distorted and changed on the mirror's surface, forming a new line of text.
It's a grade 1 sealed artifact. It will be on the right in basement 2. I can't see anything more specific.
Klein tersely acknowledged as he said,
It's your turn to ask.
Erodes immediately dispersed the silver words and presented a new question.
What other instructions do you have?
If this were any other time, Klein definitely would have secretly TSKED, but his high-strung mind made him nod.
Just watch over my illusion, like before, to deal with any accidents.
All right, Master.
Erodes didn't hesitate to give an answer, as it hurriedly added,
I will hold back my instincts. I swear to you, the great ruler above the spirit world.
Klein nodded gently, took 2 steps forward, and made the mirror look like Dwayne Dantes. The image became clearer and bigger until it looked real. After some slight adjustments, Klein made it lie in bed as though it was already sleeping. At this moment, he saw Dwayne Dantes turn his head over and smile at him with a toady look. At the same time, he reached out his hands and pulled the blanket towards his head. Without a word, Klein transformed into the cold and crazy adventurer Gehrman Sparrow, as Creeping Hunger on his left hand turned transparent. His body rapidly phased away as he traveled to the other end of Phelps Street where St. Samuel Cathedral was. Following that, he walked to the square filled with pigeons in the day, and he hid himself in a corner under the guise of the shadows. A short while later, a batch of believers who had attended Mass came out of the cathedral. Before long, servants began leaving the cathedral with all sorts of miscellaneous items, walking to the trash bins in an alley. A number of people were dealing with the feces that was found at the spot where the carriages parked at. At this moment, a servant's body suddenly trembled before he bowed his head. He seriously began cleaning the area, and he even proactively walked towards the square as though he wanted to clean the trash there. He slowly opened up a distance from the others until he came to a shadowy area. When the other servants stopped placing their attention on him, a hand suddenly outlined itself and reached out of the void, grabbing him by the shoulder and causing his body to phase away into nothingness. Klein had directly traveled to a cheap 2-bedroom condominium in East Borough. He had teleported over a few days ago with another identity to rent it.
A traveler's ability is really convenient. The only problem is that I need to have a pirate sacrifice his life every time.
Klein lampooned to relieve his anxiety as he made the servant lie in bed. Then he took out a long metal vial and threw it at him. The servant caught it and pulled out the stopper before gulping down the soporific medicine in it. In a few seconds he fell into a deep slumber as Senor surfaced to the side. Klein observed the servant on the bed as his body suddenly softened like he had transformed into a slime monster. However, he didn't collapse into a pool. After some swaying, he instantly shortened his height by 15 centimeters as his skin darkened in color. His facial features moved, and soon he had transformed into the servant. And at this moment, Senor had already taken off the servant's clothes. Without wasting any time, Klein quickly changed into those clothes and moved the items from the iron cigar case over. Picking up the broom and surveying the area before confirming that there weren't any problems, he made Senor return to the gold coin before Klein lowered his left arm and spread his fingers. He watched as creeping hunger produced an indescribable transparency effect. After teleporting back to the shadowy corner, Klein bent his back and began cleaning the area seriously. Step by step, he approached the busy servants, but maintained a distance from them to prevent anyone from chatting with him, which would increase his chances of being exposed. After about 30 minutes, the servants gathered together and entered St. Samuel Cathedral and turned into a side door. At a distance away from the priests, a servant stretched his arms and said,
"How tiring."
Klein pretended to look uninterested in the conversation due to his fatigue as he tersely nodded without participating in the conversation. Soon they returned to the servants' quarters. It comprised of 2 rather big rooms with many bunk beds inside. Beside each bed was a wardrobe and chest. Klein was immediately at a loss. He didn't know whether to head left or right. Thankfully, he was a seer. He could solely rely on his spiritual intuition on matters that didn't involve beyonders or mysterious domains. Furthermore, he was still holding onto a broom. Hence, he pretended to have his hand slip and secretly did a dowsing rod seeking. He received a revelation that he should head right. When he entered the room on the right, Klein deliberately slowed down a little, observing the actions of the other servants. Then he mimicked them by placing the broom in the region behind the door. Then he went outside to the common bathroom to wash his face, rinse his mouth, and wash his feet. After he completed all of this in a slow manner, the bed that belonged to him revealed itself, the bed that wasn't occupied. Lying in bed, Klein finally felt relieved as he secretly sighed in relief. The servants were all exhausted, and before long they fell asleep, producing a symphony of snores. Klein maintained his consciousness and very slowly removed creeping hunger. Folding it up into a tiny shape, he stuffed it inside the iron cigar case, putting it together with Azek's copper whistle and Senor's gold coin. Seconds turned to minutes as he found it impossible to sleep due to anxiety. All he could do was rely on cogitation to force himself to sleep for a few hours. He woke up at a specific time and released Senor. This marionette's cold aura rapidly melded with the surroundings as the spirit-body threads collapsed inwardly, gradually turning black without any origins.
It can still be controlled.
Klein nodded indiscernibly and made the wraith use the stained glass windows high above and the bright stone floor tiles to arrive at the staircase that led to the keepers above. He believed that if Senor hadn't been contaminated ahead of time, making Chanis Gate's core seal think of it as one of its own, it definitely would have reacted and cleansed it. How could a wraith have the ability to move freely in an Orthodox church's cathedral? And due to the tacit approval from the core seal and the disruption from the paper angel, the demigod-level archbishop that lived somewhere in the cathedral wasn't alerted. Under Klein's control, and using the sensations from the contamination, the invisible Senor slowly walked to the second floor before turning left and finding the residence of the keepers.
It's Monday tomorrow. This week's Monday shift is likely done by the keeper I met first.
Klein had long figured out the roster, so he made the dark red coated wraith stealthily pass through the wooden door and float into different rooms to identify the target. As there were only a few people inside, he quickly found the pale elder with loose facial skin, sparse hair, and a big nose. Senor immediately took out a sedative vial and placed it to the side. Then, before the keeper sensed anything, it possessed him. The keeper, who was in deep sleep, lost control over his body before he could even wake up to resist. All he could do was open his grayish-blue eyes and watch himself slowly pick up the vial and pull off the stopper. Then he downed the liquid inside. His body convulsed abnormally as his organs seemed to be engaged in a violent struggle. After a full minute, he slowly went limp and closed his eyes again, entering a dreamless sleep. After doing all of this, Senor left the body of the keeper and used all kinds of mirror surfaces to leap back to the servants' quarters before entering Klein's body. Klein immediately emitted a cold, dead, and distant aura. Even showing an expression appeared to be difficult. He slowly got out of bed and silently left the servants' quarters. In the shadows and murals that weren't illuminated by the moonlight, he walked to the second floor and entered the target's room. Standing by the bedside, Klein, whilst in the appearance of a servant, slowly grew taller as his hair turned gray and sparse while his nose enlarged significantly. In just a few seconds, he looked identical to the keeper who just drank the sedative. Even his aura was identical. Changing into the black clergyman's coat that was placed to the side, Klein moved the keeper's and servant's clothes underneath the bed and laid down as he kept note of the time. At 5:30, he woke up ahead of time, finishing the white bread he had prepared the night before and drank a cup of water. He then looked quietly out the window. Just as day broke, Klein maintained his deadpan state and walked out the door. He went to the first floor, and following the path he had previously verified, he took a left turn. After walking for a moment, he wasn't surprised to see a priest. This was his experience as a former Nighthawk. Therefore, Klein wasn't too worried that he couldn't find the path. The priest stood outside a secret door that led underground. As he raised his right hand, he tapped 4 times clockwise on his chest and said,
"May the goddess bless you."
Praise the lady.
Klein replied hoarsely and similarly drew a crimson moon. He didn't stay any longer and walked past the priest. Under the lamps that lined the walls, he walked down the staircase and arrived at the crossroads. Based on his understanding of his environment, Klein believed that turning right would leave the cathedral, and it would likely lead to the disguised security company or other organization belonging to the Nighthawks. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to turn left. At that moment, he saw a man wearing a red glove walk over. The casually dressed man had black hair and green eyes with handsome looks. He was none other than Leonard Mitchell.